I'm Indy Neidell, and this is another exciting edition of Out of the Foxholes, where I sit here in the chair of infinite knowledge and answer all your questions about the Second World War. Roman McCoy asks, what happened to the French and Dutch colonies in America after the capitulation of their governments? Okay. When the Netherlands fell in May 1940, their possessions in the Americas went under the name the Dutch West Indies. They include the Caribbean islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao, and Dutch Guiana, which is present-day Suriname in South America. Earlier in 1939 and 40, Dutch interest in Dutch Guiana actually increased because it had big bauxite fields. See, bauxite is used in the production of aluminum, which is vital for making things like airplanes. So the Dutch government started selling loads of bauxite to Britain and France, but also the United States. After June 1940, there was a fear in the British High Command that Vichy France might launch an invasion from Vichy-controlled French Guiana into Dutch Guiana, Suriname. However, the Dutch governor, Johannes Kielstra, refused British military help. So he continued to govern, let's call it Suriname, just make it easy. He continued to govern Suriname as a de facto independent region, and the Surinamese, I guess that's what you say, economy boomed from the exports of bauxite and gold. By 1941, the U.S. has grown increasingly dependent on Surinamese bauxite. So in November that year, President Franklin Roosevelt sends American troops to occupy Suriname, also afraid of a sudden Vichy French attack. Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao were occupied by British soldiers from May 1940 to protect their naval bases. Now, the French West Indies include Martinique, Guadeloupe, and French Guiana, right? French Guiana next to Dutch Guiana. Their governors all declared loyalty to Philippe Pétain's Vichy state in the summer of 1940. Consequently, a British blockade of the territories was put in place to stop the export of things like gold, rum, and sugar to occupied Europe. Because of the embargo, there are severe food shortages that will last throughout the war. No Allied invasion of the territories was launched, and the French West Indies still remain a distant Vichy French enclave here in 1941. Akseli Mansikkamaki, that's a lovely Finnish name. Akseli Mansikkamaki asks, did the USSR pose a threat to British India? And to what extent did this affect British decisions early in the war? Well, as far back as the early 19th century, the British and Russian empires had a great interest in the annexation or the colonization of Central Asia, the British expanding from India and the Russians expanding from the north. This great game, as it was called, ended in 1895 when they agreed on the Afghan borders. Afghanistan thus became the buffer state between the two giants. And this was still the case in 1939 when war broke out in Europe. Nevertheless, a Russian invasion of India is, and always has been, a real threat. India has an enormous abundance of resources and manpower, and it's like a giant fortress between the British ports of Suez, Aden, and Singapore. Taking India would be a terrible blow to the British. So they had a contingency battle plan, the Interim Plan of Operations in India. Catchy name, yeah. As a Russian or Soviet invasion of India first had to go through Afghanistan to get there, the whole plan was centered on Afghanistan. So this was the deal. If the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, the British would see this as a direct casus belli against the USSR and declare war. The British Army would have then entered Afghanistan in a defensive line from Jalalabad to Kandahar, and a British military mission would go to Kabul to help with Afghan mobilization and strategy. The threat became greater with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in August 1939 and the subsequent German-Soviet invasion of Poland the following month. Meanwhile, German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop advised Joseph Stalin and his foreign minister Vyacheslav Molotov to turn south and attack British India during several of their meetings. So there was a bit of government panic in late 1939 in Kabul, and British and Indian officials were on high alert last year in 1940. However, with the end of 1940 and no Soviet invasion in progress, tensions began to die down and, well, things have cooled off a bit. Nicholas Bertrand asks, what happened to French soldiers in Britain that refused to continue the fight after June 1940? After the fall of France, some 28,000 Frenchmen remained in Britain. Sure, many, many thousands more had been evacuated at, well, Dunkirk, for example. Still, those were quickly shuttled through camps and repatriated back to France after a few days. Only about a tenth of the French soldiers left during Operations Dynamo and Ariel remained in England when General Charles Hunziker signed the armistice with the Germans on June 22nd, 1940. These soldiers, they were conflicted as to how to proceed. Some followed Vichy French leader Philippe Pétain's orders to lay down their arms and return, while others followed General Charles de Gaulle to continue the fight as part of the Free French forces. Many, however, just wanted to go home to their families and away from war. So despite de Gaulle's June 18th appeal, a majority of the French soldiers tried to repatriate to either Vichy France or even the occupied zone. In fact, by the end of July, only 7,000 French soldiers had joined Charles de Gaulle's Free French forces. Well, that is it for today. If you want me to answer your question, you can submit it at our community forum at community.timeghost.tv. The link is in the description. And you can join the Time Ghost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv so all your dreams can come true. And by that, I mean we can continue to bring you amazing and awesome content. And do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.